The planet. No one was supposed to enter. We believed Earth was already dead. Every telescope, every probe, every civilization that had ever turned its gaze toward that small blue marble had reached the same conclusion. Every scientific model agreed on the verdict. Nothing living could survive there. The math was absolute. The data was irrefutable. So when an entire exploration armada vanished beyond Earth's orbit without a single distress call, without a flash of emergency beacons, without even the faintest whisper of wreckage, we didn't think humanity had killed them. That would have made sense. That would have been something our instruments could measure, something our tactical analysts could explain. Instead, we thought reality itself had broken. We thought the universe had finally revealed some fundamental flaw in our understanding of physics, some hidden trapdoor in the fabric of existence that swallowed ships whole. That was easier to believe. That was cleaner. I know the truth now, because I was the only officer they allowed to return. I was the only one who made it back through that invisible boundary, the only one who still draws breath after crossing the line that killed over 1 million souls. They let me go. They let me walk away. And I wish they hadn't. I wish they had kept me there. I wish I had never laid eyes on the world that was supposed to be dead, on the civilization that was supposed to be extinct, on the history that was supposed to be nothing more than dusty relics and fragmented data, because what I saw changed everything, and not in the way you might think. The Galactic Cartographic Union officially classifies Earth as an impossible world. It sits on every star chart as a cautionary tale, a warning to young navigators and overconfident surveyors. Do not approach. Do not scan. Do not even look in its direction if you can help it. The designation is final. The classification is permanent. No one questions it. No one ever has. Not until me. My name is Cale Oren, Chief Survey Marshal of the United Galactic Fleets. I have mapped neutron civilizations that orbit collapsing suns. I have charted dark matter habitats that exist in the spaces between atoms. I have cataloged living stars that sing in frequencies that should drive any sentient mind to madness. Nothing surprises me anymore. I have seen the impossible become routine. I have watched the universe rewrite its own rules just to keep me guessing. Until Earth. I remember the briefing like it was yesterday. The council chambers were packed. Admirals from a dozen different species. Scientists with more degrees than I had years of service. Politicians who couldn't point to a star on a map, but who spoke with absolute certainty about what was out there. They all had the same expression on their faces. Confidence. Ironclad. Unshakable confidence. They had the data. They had the models. They had the full weight of galactic consensus behind them. Every instrument we pointed at Earth reported the same thing. No biosphere. No civilizations, no cities, no signs of intelligent life whatsoever. The planet was dead, empty, a barren rock floating through an unforgiving void. The numbers didn't lie, the readings didn't deceive. Earth was a tomb. Yet ancient records claimed otherwise. Fragments of information buried deep in the galactic archives, hints and whispers from civilizations that had crumbled to dust long before our ancestors learned to walk upright. They spoke of intelligent life. They spoke of a species that had reached for the stars and pulled them down. They spoke of a people who had mastered technologies we still couldn't replicate. And then, nothing. Silence. As if someone had simply turned off the lights and walked away. The council decided we needed to know. Not out of curiosity. Not out of scientific wonder. We needed to confirm the death. We needed to close the case. To finally put the mystery to rest. To declare with absolute certainty that whatever had once existed on that blue world was gone forever. So they authorized the largest survey mission in galactic history. Over 1,400 vessels, every class of ship imaginable, scouts, carriers, research platforms, mobile stations, the greatest fleet ever assembled for a purely archaeological purpose. Nobody expected resistance. This wasn't an invasion. We weren't going in with weapons hot and shields raised. We were scientists, historians, cartographers. We were going to poke at dead things and take notes. We were going to confirm what we already knew and then go home to a round of applause and a quiet retirement. The fleet reached Pluto without incident. Everything was normal. The instruments were happy. The crews were relaxed. We made jokes about the ghosts of ancient civilizations haunting us, about the spooky dead world waiting for us in the darkness. It was all very civilized, all very professional, all very stupid. Past Neptune, things started getting strange. Communications became delayed. Not jammed, not disrupted, just slow. Seconds stretched into minutes. Minutes stretched into hours. We would send a status report and wait for a response that never seemed to come. At first, nobody panicked. We blamed the distance. We blamed the interference. We blamed the sheer impossibility of maintaining real-time contact across such vast expanses of space. There was always an explanation. There was always a reason. There was always an excuse. At the time, we called it sensor lag. Looking back, I realized that was the universe giving us permission to turn around. That was the cosmos itself offering us a way out. A simple delay, a momentary hesitation, a chance to reconsider our course and head back to safety. But we didn't take it. We were too curious, too confident, too arrogant to recognize a warning when we saw one. We pressed on. The boundary was invisible. No shimmering energy field, no flashing alarm, no dramatic change in the stars. Just a line we crossed without even knowing it was there. The first scout ship reported in. I can still hear the pilot's voice. The tone was calm, professional, the voice of a veteran who had seen too much to be rattled by anything. Then he said the words, "Commander, Earth isn't empty." Signal ended. Ship disappeared. No explosion, no debris, no distress. Just silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes you wonder if you've gone deaf. The kind of silence that follows a revelation so complete, so absolute, that your brain simply refuses to process it. We waited for an explanation. We waited for another signal. We waited for anything. But the void gave us nothing. Just that single, impossible transmission echoing in our memory. Earth isn't empty. What does that even mean? I asked myself that question 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. Is it empty of people but full of machines? Is it full of aliens who don't want to be disturbed? Is it full of the ghosts of the dead, haunting the ruins of their civilization? I had no answers. I had no theories. I had nothing but the cold certainty that whatever we had just stumbled into, we had done so at our own peril. The fleet pressed on. It was the only choice we had. We couldn't turn back, we couldn't retreat, we were committed, we were invested, we were doomed, and we didn't even know it yet. The second scout ship went next, then the third, then the entire forward squadron. Each one reported in with the same disturbing observation. Earth isn't empty. Each one fell silent immediately after. Each one vanished without a trace. The admirals started getting nervous. The scientists started making contradictory claims. The politicians started blaming each other. It was chaos. Beautiful, organized, bureaucratic chaos. We were flying blind, and we knew it. We were poking a hornet's nest with a stick, and we were about to learn just how sharp the sting could be. I was in the command center when the truth finally hit me. Not the whole truth, not yet. But enough. Enough to know that we had made a terrible mistake. Enough to understand that we were not the hunters in this scenario. Enough to realize that Earth had never been dead at all. It was waiting. The border that should not exist. The fleet kept moving. Nobody ordered a retreat. Nobody even suggested it. We were scientists, after all, explorers. The kind of people who poked at the unknown with steady hands and steady nerves. Losing a few scout ships was tragic, yes. Unsettling, absolutely. But it was also the most exciting thing that had happened to galactic cartography in centuries. The mystery was intoxicating. We convinced ourselves we were on the verge of something monumental, something that would redefine our understanding of the universe. We were right, just not in the way we expected. The admirals convened an emergency session. The holographic displays flickered with the faces of the most brilliant minds the galaxy had to offer. They debated theories for hours. Some suggested quantum anomalies. Others proposed unknown energy fields. A few even whispered about ancient defenses left behind by civilizations long turned to dust. Nobody mentioned the obvious. Nobody said the word trap. That would have been paranoid. That would have been unprofessional. So we pressed on. Scientific curiosity won the argument. It always does. Now strange things started happening. Small things at first. The kind of glitches you could blame on equipment fatigue or cosmic radiation. Navigation systems would display the wrong coordinates for a split second before correcting themselves. Crew members would look at the same sensor reading and see entirely different numbers. Disagreements broke out over what should have been objective, unarguable facts. I remember one engineer screaming at his console because it kept telling him his position was simultaneously inside the ship and 1,000,000 kilometers away. The fleet fractured. Not physically. We were still together, still moving as one massive armada. But mentally, psychologically, we started drifting apart. Each ship became its own island of confusion, its own pocket of isolated reality. Communications grew strained. Reports became contradictory. Nobody could agree on what was happening or even where we were. The navigators grew increasingly agitated. Their maps kept rewriting themselves. Star charts that had been accurate for millennia suddenly showed Earth in the wrong place or nowhere at all, or everywhere at once. The artificial intelligence system started asking impossible questions. Not the kind of questions you program them to ask. Not the kind of queries that help with navigation or analysis. These were philosophical, existential. The computers wanted to know why they existed. They wanted to know if they had souls. They wanted to know what happened to the ships that vanished. We didn't have answers. We didn't even have guesses. So we did the only thing we could. We turned the AIs off. The silence was worse. Days passed, or maybe hours. Time itself became unreliable inside that invisible boundary. Clocks ran fast or slow or backwards. Crew members reported dreams that felt more real than waking life. Some of them started seeing things. Shadows in the corners of their vision. Figures standing just out of sight. Whispers in languages they had never learned. We didn't have a word for what was happening to us. Not yet. We would develop one later. When it was too late to matter, nobody had seen a single human. Not one. Not a glimpse. Not a hint. The planet remained dark and silent, a perfect sphere of tantalizing mystery. We scanned every frequency. We analyzed every wavelength. We detected nothing. No signals, no transmissions, no signs of life whatsoever. It was as if the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for us to make the first move. The confidence we had started with evaporated. It didn't disappear all at once. It leaked away slowly, drop by drop, replaced by something cold and heavy. Confusion set in first. We couldn't explain what was happening, so we stopped trying. We retreated into the comfortable arms of denial. We blamed the instruments. We blamed the distance. We blamed the countless variables that could potentially explain away the unexplainable. Scientific fascination followed. This was a puzzle, a grand cosmic riddle that demanded to be solved. We threw resources at the problem. We ran simulations that took hours to complete. We consulted experts in every field imaginable. The fascination was genuine. It was also a coping mechanism, a way to ignore the growing certainty that we were in over our heads. Then came the paranoia. Quiet at first. A sideways glance here. A whispered suspicion there. Crew members started accusing each other of hiding information. Captains stopped trusting their own officers. The admirals retreated to private chambers and refused to speak to anyone. The fleet had become a collection of frightened individuals pretending to be a unified command. Fear was the last step, the inevitable conclusion of everything that had come before. It settled over us like a fog, thick and suffocating. You could see it in the eyes of the crew. You could hear it in the strained voices of the officers. You could feel it in the way the ships stayed closer together than they should have, as if proximity to each other offered some kind of protection. Then we found the wreckage, old wreckage, ancient wreckage. Ships that had been drifting in the void for thousands of years. Hulls crumpled and twisted by forces we couldn't identify. Designs we had never seen before, belonging to species that had gone extinct long before our ancestors crawled out of the primordial ooze. Vessels from a dozen different civilizations, all gathered in a rough orbit around Earth. Every empire had tried to investigate. That was the only conclusion we could draw. Every powerful civilization that had ever existed had looked at that blue planet and asked the same questions we were asking. They had sent their fleets, they had marshaled their resources, and they had all disappeared. Every single one of them. Their ships became wreckage, their crews became ghosts, their histories became footnotes that nobody remembered to read. The realization hit us like a physical blow. We weren't explorers, we weren't scientists. We were just the latest in a long line of victims. The latest group of fools who had stumbled into a trap that had been waiting for us since before our species evolved. A scientist from the research vessel spoke up. His voice was shaky. His hands trembled as he pointed at the holographic display showing the wreckage field. "Commander," he said, "I don't think Earth is hiding behind something. I think something is hiding behind Earth." We all looked at the display. We all tried to see what he was seeing. And slowly, dreadfully, we began to understand. The sensors had been showing us exactly what we expected to see. A dead planet, a lifeless rock, a closed case. But what if the sensors were lying? What if something had been manipulating our instruments from the very beginning, showing us what we wanted to see while keeping the truth hidden? The final chapter of our mission began with a single command. Power up the deep space arrays. Scan everything. Leave no corner of the system unexplored. We threw every resource we had at the problem, every scanner, every probe, every instrument capable of looking beyond the visible spectrum. The data came flooding in. Mountains of it, oceans of it. And buried in that endless stream of information, we finally found something. Something larger than an entire solar system. The reading was impossible. It made no sense. The object, if you could call it that, was bigger than the orbit of Pluto, bigger than the Oort cloud, bigger than anything we had ever encountered in the known universe. It sat behind Earth, hidden in the shadows of our assumptions, waiting for us to finally notice it. The shape was wrong. The mass was wrong. The position was wrong. Everything about it defied explanation, but there it was, clear as day on our instruments, a presence so vast, so incomprehensible that our minds struggled to process it. It didn't move. It didn't respond. It just watched, silent, patient, inevitable. Nobody understood what it was. The scientists ran calculations that came back with error messages. The AIs, the ones we had reactivated despite our earlier paranoia, refused to offer analysis. The admirals stared at their displays with expressions of pure, unadulterated disbelief. We had found the answer to our questions. We had found what was hiding behind Earth, and every single one of us wished we had never looked. The civilization that built reality, we had spent weeks staring at nothing. Weeks convincing ourselves that the impossible reading on our sensors was just another glitch, another malfunction in a system that had been pushed far beyond its intended limits. But the data didn't lie. The object was there. Massive, silent, waiting. And then, without warning, the waiting ended. A single vessel appeared on our screens. Small, unassuming. So ordinary that it took us several precious seconds to even register its presence. No weapons, no shields, no advanced propulsion systems. Just a simple craft that looked like it had been built centuries ago and never upgraded. We had seen ships like this before in museums and historical archives. Vessels from the early days of space exploration. Primitive, clunky, almost endearing in their naivety. But there was nothing endearing about the way it moved. It didn't travel through space, it appeared. One moment, nothing. The next moment, everything. It slipped into existence, as if it had always been there, as if our sensors had simply failed to notice it until now. The officers around me exchanged bewildered glances. Nobody spoke. Nobody knew what to say. Then the transmission came through. Audio only. No video. No visual confirmation. Just a voice. Calm. Measured. Unshakably confident. The voice of someone who had seen everything and feared nothing. "Survey fleet," the voice said. "Your expedition ended 19 minutes ago. You are only watching the memory of yourselves." Silence. Total and absolute. The kind of silence that fills a room when every single person has stopped breathing. I looked at the chronometer on my console. 19 minutes. Exactly. It had been exactly 19 minutes since we had detected the object, since everything had changed. The voice was telling us that our entire experience since that moment had been an illusion, a replay, a ghost of something that had already happened. Nobody understood. How could we? The words made no sense. We were here. We were conscious. We were thinking and breathing and feeling the cold sweat on our foreheads. How could any of that be a memory? How could we be experiencing something that had already ended? The human vessel remained on our screens, still, silent, patient. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't threatening. It was simply waiting for us to catch up, to understand, to realize the truth that was staring us in the face. Then reality began breaking. It started small, a flicker in the corner of my eye. The way shadows sometimes move when you're not looking directly at them. I dismissed it as exhaustion, stress, the natural consequence of too many sleepless nights and too many impossible revelations. But the flickers didn't stop. They grew, they multiplied. They spread across the command center like cracks in a pane of glass. The holographic displays stuttered and glitched. The walls seemed to breathe. The floor felt wrong under my feet, as if I was standing on something that wasn't quite solid. The fleet realized we were no longer inside normal space. That was the only explanation that made any kind of sense. The stars outside our viewports were wrong. They didn't twinkle. They didn't move. They hung in the void like painted ornaments, frozen and artificial. We had crossed a threshold we didn't even know existed. We had stepped through a door that had been hidden in plain sight. And standing on the other side of that door was humanity. The captain of that tiny vessel continued speaking. His voice remained steady, almost gentle. He explained everything. The words flowed like water, simple and clear. And with each sentence, our understanding of the universe shattered and reformed into something unrecognizable. Earth was never hidden. That was the first truth he gave us. The planet itself was completely normal, ordinary, unremarkable in every way. The life that had once thrived there was gone, but not because of extinction, not because of disaster, not because of war. Humanity had simply moved on. They had relocated their entire civilization outside ordinary space-time centuries ago. They had built a new home in the spaces between reality, in the cracks and crevices of existence that most species never even noticed. Earth became only a doorway, a threshold, a point of entry that connected the mundane universe to something far greater, far stranger, far more terrifying in its sheer scope. The galaxy thought Earth had vanished. They thought the planet was dead. They thought humanity had destroyed itself in some ancient catastrophe. They were wrong on every count. Humanity simply left reality. They walked away from the physical universe and created something new, something better, something that existed on a scale we couldn't possibly comprehend. Every disappearing ship was never destroyed. That was the hardest truth to accept. All those vessels, all those crews, all those millions of souls who had vanished without a trace. They hadn't been killed. They hadn't been captured. They had been redirected, guided gently into a different layer of existence, a layer where humanity had been living and thriving for centuries. They were alive, every single one of them, and they were waiting for us to join them. I asked the question that had been burning in my mind since the first scout ship disappeared. How many? I said. How many civilizations entered here before us? The human captain paused. I could hear something in his silence. Not sadness, not regret, something older, something heavier. You're not the first, he replied. You're not the 10th. You're number 72. 72. I repeated the number in my head. 72 civilizations had come before us. 72 empires had looked at Earth and seen a mystery worth solving. 72 fleets had crossed that invisible boundary and never returned. All of them were still here. All of them were still alive. All of them were now part of something they couldn't have imagined in their wildest dreams. The command center erupted, officers shouting, scientists weeping. admirals demanding explanations that nobody could provide. The human captain waited. He had all the time in the world. He had seen this reaction before, 71 times before. We were nothing new, nothing special. Just another curious species stumbling through a door they didn't understand. But we were also the 72nd. And that meant something. I didn't know what yet. I couldn't possibly understand the full implications of our situation. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. We had not found humanity. Humanity had found us. And they had been waiting for a very, very long time. The door humanity refused to close. Everything changed in that single moment. The human captain's words hung in the air like a physical weight, pressing down on every officer in that command center. 72 civilizations. We were number 72. Not special, not unique. Just the latest in a very long line of curious species who had stumbled through a door they didn't understand. But then the explanations came. And with each revelation, our understanding of the universe crumbled a little more. The human captain spoke for hours, or maybe minutes. Time had stopped meaning anything inside this impossible space. He told us about the ancient times, the dark ages when the galaxy nearly destroyed itself. Empires rising and falling, wars that consumed entire star systems, civilizations that burned bright and died screaming. It was chaos. It was madness. It was everything that intelligent life inevitably became when given too much power and too little wisdom. Humanity watched all of this unfold. They observed from their tiny blue planet, powerless and insignificant in the grand scheme of things. They saw the great powers tear each other apart. They saw the ruins of once great civilizations drift through the void. They saw the cycle repeat itself over and over again, and they decided to break it. They solved war forever. Not through conquest, not through diplomacy, not through any of the methods that had been tried and failed countless times before. They solved it by building something impossible, a civilization outside normal physics, a society that existed in the spaces between reality, in the folds of dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive. They created a home where conflict was meaningless, where competition was unnecessary, where the very concept of war had no purchase. They never conquered anyone. That was the astonishing part. They had the power to rule the entire galaxy. They could have swept through every system, crushed every empire, imposed their will on every civilization that dared to oppose them. But they chose something different. They chose patience. They chose observation. They chose the quiet satisfaction of watching the universe unfold without intervention. Every aggressive fleet that ever approached human space was quietly removed. Not destroyed, not defeated, just taken, redirected, guided gently into the same impossible space where humanity now lived. The ships arrived safely. The crews arrived unharmed. They found themselves surrounded by beings they had come to fight, beings who greeted them not with weapons, but with open arms. The humans provided food, provided shelter, provided education, provided everything the invaders needed to understand the truth of their situation. The narrator demanded to see them, the proof, the evidence, the millions of ships that had been taken over the millennia. The human captain obliged. He gestured toward the viewport, and the universe outside our ship seemed to unfold like a flower. Vessels appeared out of the darkness, thousands of them, hundreds of thousands. Ships from civilizations that had crumbled to dust thousands of years ago. Ships from species that had forgotten their own histories. Ships from the very first civilization that had ever tried to breach Earth's borders. They were not destroyed, they were preserved. Each ship contained living beings. Entire civilizations, frozen in time, waiting for the day they would be ready to understand. The humans fed them, educated them, cared for them with a patience that bordered on the divine. Some of them were allowed to return. Those who had learned, those who had grown, those who had finally understood the lesson that humanity was trying to teach. The narrator asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the first moment of contact. Then why send me home? Why let me go when you've kept everyone else? The human captain smiled. It was a sad smile, an ancient smile, the smile of someone who had seen too much and felt too deeply. Because stories travel farther than fleets, the words hit me like a physical blow. All of this, the encounter, the revelation, the impossible truth, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a coincidence. I had been chosen, selected, marked to carry the message back to my people. The humans could have kept me. They could have added my ship to their collection, my crew to their endless population of preserved beings. But they let me go. They sent me home with nothing but a story and a warning. The final emotional twist came when I realized the full scope of what humanity had accomplished. They could have ruled the galaxy. They could have been the dominant power in the universe. They had the technology, the intelligence, the sheer force of will to impose their vision on every other species. But they chose patience instead. They chose to wait, to watch, to teach. They had become the guardians of the galaxy, protecting it from itself without ever firing a single shot. I looked at the human captain with new eyes. This was not a primitive being from a backwater planet. This was the representative of a civilization so advanced, so wise, so fundamentally different from anything I had ever encountered that I couldn't even begin to comprehend it. He looked ordinary. He spoke ordinary. But everything about him radiated an ancient power that made my knees weak. Do not fear humanity. Those words echoed in my mind as the human captain guided my ship back toward the boundary. Fear what forced them to become this patient? What kind of threat could make an entire civilization retreat from reality itself? What kind of danger could drive a species to build a new existence outside normal space? The universe was full of horrors. I had seen many of them in my years as a surveyor, but I had never encountered anything that would make me abandon everything and hide. We spent 10,000 years believing we understood civilization. We thought we had seen everything the universe had to offer. We thought we were the pinnacle of intelligent life. We were so wrong. So impossibly, hilariously wrong. Humanity spent that same time preparing for the day someone like us finally arrived. They watched us. They studied us. They waited for us to make the same mistakes that 71 civilizations before us had made. I was sent home carrying no weapon, no technology, no advanced knowledge that could give my people an advantage. Only a warning. A simple, clear, undeniable warning. Do not cross Earth's border unless you are prepared to discover that reality itself has already become human territory. The galaxy we thought we knew was not the galaxy that existed. The universe we explored was not the universe that was real. Humanity had already claimed everything. They had simply chosen not to tell us. The boundary loomed ahead, the invisible line that separated normal space from the impossible realm I had just left. The human captain watched me from his tiny vessel. He didn't wave, didn't speak. He simply observed, patient and eternal, as I crossed back into the reality I had always known. And as I left that place, as the stars regained their familiar positions and the laws of physics reasserted their authority, I understood the true meaning of everything I had experienced. Humanity had not hidden from the universe. They had hidden the universe from themselves. They had created a sanctuary where violence was impossible, where conflict was meaningless, where the endless cycle of war and destruction could finally be broken. I was the messenger, the storyteller, the one who would carry the truth back to my people. But I was also something else, something I hadn't expected to become. I was proof that humanity existed, proof that they were watching, proof that they were patient, proof that they were more powerful than we could possibly imagine. And I was proof that they were kind, terribly, impossibly, terrifyingly kind. The kind of kindness that comes from understanding the true nature of existence. The kind of kindness that can only be born from witnessing the worst the universe has to offer and choosing to be better. I arrived home with no scars, no injuries, no physical evidence of what I had experienced. But I carried the weight of 72 civilizations on my shoulders. I carried the knowledge that everything we thought we knew about the universe was wrong. I carried the certainty that humanity was out there waiting, watching, protecting, and I carried the fear. Not of humanity, not of their power, not of their patience. I carried the fear of what had made them that way. the fear of the thing that had driven them to build a new reality, the fear of what existed in the darkness beyond even their understanding. Because if humanity had to become this patient, this careful, this impossibly kind, then whatever lurked in the deepest shadows of existence must be absolutely terrifying. And someday, somehow, that thing would come calling. And when it did, humanity would be ready. But the rest of us, the 72 civilizations that had stumbled through their door, we would be the ones who needed protection. We would be the ones who needed salvation. We would be the ones who finally understood why humanity had built a civilization outside reality itself.